There are few fighters more divisive than Jonathan Dwight Jones. The fighter's dominance over some of the sport's all-time greats has seen him considered one of the greatest of all time. But those achievements have been overshadowed by constant scandals outside of the cage. Today, we look at the biggest faux pas Jones has committed during his career. From failed drug tests and assault charges to getting an entire event canceled. Welcome to the INC, and these are 10 of the worst Jon Jones scandals. Number 10. Ipokes. Along with being one of the sport's greatest fighters, Jones is recognized as one of the sport's dirtiest, largely due to his tendency to poke fighters in the eye as a means of maintaining distance. Jones' dirtiness gained most scrutiny in his match with Glover Teixeira at UFC 172, where Jones repeatedly tagged his Brazilian opponent on his way to a unanimous decision. UFC President Dana White would cite the match as a key reason for the UFC's clampdown on Jones' style of distance management. The fighter himself responded to the backlash in typically humble fashion. Jones has largely stayed clear of eye-pokes in the later years of his career, but his admittance the move was his favorite technique did little to improve his reputation. Number 9. The UFC 178 Brawl. Jones is known by many fans for his feud with UFC Hall of Famer Daniel Cormier, but their first major conflict came outside of the cage. In August 2014, Jones was booked to face the unbeaten Cormier in the main event of UFC 178, with the two agreeing to take part in a promotional tour to advertise the fight. Animosity between Jones and DC had been growing in the months prior, with Cormier taking issue with Jones' repeated misdemeanors and the perceived damage it was doing to the sport's reputation. Tensions between the fighters came to a head in dramatic fashion. Jones was fined $50,000 for his part in the brawl, while the match between the two was rescheduled once Jones suffered a leg injury 3 days after their conflict. Jones and Cormier would later face off at UFC 182, with Jones winning an ill-tempered bout by unanimous decision, only to be embroiled in further controversy when he tested positive for cocaine during a pre-fight drug test. Number 8. The First DUI. Every great villain has an origin story, and Jones's first foray to the dark side came in May 2012 when he crashed his Bentley in the early hours of the morning. While neither Jones or his passengers received any major injury, Jones refused police orders to take a breathalyzer test and pled guilty to DUI charges, being forced to pay a $1,000 fine. The narrative at the time presented the incident as Jones allowing the pressure of fame to get to him, although later reports suggested Jones had suffered 3 further traffic incidences between 2008 and 2009. Jones would suffer further scandals relating to his actions behind the wheel, notably in 2016 when he was charged with unlawful drag racing and forced to face a district judge who heeded some pretty ominous words to the disgraced champion.
If you do come back, it won't go well. So take this serious.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Young.
Number 7. UFC 151. Jones has often been accused of receiving preferential treatment from UFC President Dana White, but there once was a time he and the president were firmly at loggerheads. A few months after his DUI arrest, Jones was booked to face Pride legend Dan Henderson in the main event of UFC 151, only for Henderson to withdraw 8 days before the event after suffering an ACL tear. Chael Sonnen, who'd received warning of Hendo's imminent pullout, agreed to step in as a short-notice replacement, only for Jones and coach Greg Jackson to turn down the fight citing a lack of prep time. With no main event and an undercard short of marketable names, the UFC were forced to cancel a show for the first time in their history. White threw Jones under the bus in the days after the announcement, stating Jones's refusal to fight Sonnen as one of the most selfish decisions during his time in charge of the promotion. Most of White's venom, however, was directed to Jackson, with the boss describing the legendary coach as a weirdo whose actions were killing the sport.
I don't give a shit what Greg Jackson thinks. Guy's a fucking weirdo, man. Are you kidding me?
saying if he takes a fight with Chael Sonnen would be the biggest mistake of his entire career because he's not ready for that guy. Greg Jackson should never be interviewed by anybody ever again except for a psychiatrist.
Jones and Sonnen would eventually face off in the main event of UFC 159, with Jones going on to win a one-sided fight by first-round stoppage. Number 6. Uprooting 232. From a UFC pay-per-view Jones got cancelled to one which nearly went the same way. At UFC 232, Jones was booked in a rematch against Alexander Gustafsson for the vacant light heavyweight title. But 5 days before the event, he was flagged by USADA after trace elements of Turnbull were found in his system. Jeff Nowitzki, the UFC president for Health and Performance, attempted to defend Jones, claiming the fighter's positive test was caused by a pulsing effect stemming from a previous ingestion in 2017. Yeah, more on that later. While the Nevada State Athletic Commission refused to sanction Jones, California was willing to oblige, forcing the UFC to move the entire event to the Inglewood Forum to keep the fighter on the card. Jones would dominate Gustafsson on his way to a third-round stoppage, but the failed drug test along with the lengths the UFC went to appease him put yet another asterisk on his record. Number 5. Battery charge. After his controversial win over Thiago Santos at UFC 239, Jones was arrested on a battery charge following an incident at a strip club earlier in the year. According to reports, Jon had been attending a get-together with his brother Chandler when he got too hands-on with a waitress, with the woman in question suggesting Jon's actions took a more sinister turn.
The issue is that when you put me back down over by the bar, you smacked my
The waitress later claimed Jones slapped her multiple times before kissing her without consent, allegations which Jones denied days after the scandal became public, with Jones's victim admitting she feared pressing charges due to Jones's public standing.
So you don't know if you, as of right now, if you want to press charges or not because you feel like he's quote-unquote untouchable?
After initially disputing the accusation, Jones pleaded no contest to all charges and received a 90-day deferred sentence. In addition, he was ordered to pay court fees and has since been barred from all Albuquerque nightclubs. Number 4. Failed drug test number 1. In April 2016, Jones and Cormier were set to face off in the main event of UFC 200, a marquee card intended as a company celebration before its purchase by Endeavor. The company's plans, however, were thrown out the window when Jones tested positive for the estrogen blocker clomiphene, forcing his match with Cormier to be removed from the card 3 days before the event. Jones repeatedly maintained his innocence during the saga, infamously claiming his positive test came from taking contaminated Cialis. Dick Pill Jon would later face the media in a hastily arranged press conference, where the stresses of the occasion finally got to the former champion.
It's hard to see it. I'm sorry that I'm crying. I believe something good will come from this, but right now it's hard to see it. And I just got to keep going.
While UFC 200 still went ahead, the impact of Jones's failed test was profound, with Jones receiving a 12-month suspension, a black mark over the company's biggest ever card, and perhaps most damning of all, an Amanda Nunes main event. Number 3. Failed drug test number 2. After several attempts to book the fight, Jones and Cormier would have their long-awaited rematch in the main event of UFC 214. A back-and-forth bout saw its pivotal moment in the middle of the third round, when Jones rocked Cormier with a head kick before becoming the first man to finish his longtime rival. 6 weeks later, it was revealed Jones had failed a post-fight drug test after testing positive for Turnbull, the same substance found in the system during the build for UFC 232. Jones was initially issued a 4-year suspension by USADA, although this was later reduced to 15 months after Jones provided substantial assistance to the firm. Jones's win was overturned to a no contest, and the title returned to Cormier, who later claimed the UFC heavyweight title and taking the double champ crown Jones had spoken about in his post-fight interview. Number 2. Domestic violence. In September 2021, Jones's first bout with Alexander Gustafsson was inducted into the UFC Hall of Fame. But just hours after the ceremony, police were called to his hotel room following reports of an incident between himself and fiancée Jessie Moses. According to police reports, Moses was found with blood on her face and clothing, as well as bruising consistent with someone who had been struck. Jones was apprehended by officers as he attempted to flee the scene, where footage of a belligerent and intoxicated Jones quickly went viral on social media.
A black man can't drink? Getting elected into the Hall of Fame, and now this is what I got? You fucking cracker! You fucking cracker!
Jones was charged with 1 count of domestic battery with a $16,000 bail, although Moses chose not to pursue a restraining order against the fighter. The biggest blow to Jones, however, came from coach Mike Winkeljohn, who announced the former champion had been banned from his Jackson Wink training camp, ending a 12-year working relationship between the two. Number 1. The Hit and Run. By 2015, Jones was regarded as the pound-for-pound best fighter in the world, and preparing to make his 9th title defense against Rumble Johnson at UFC 187. On April 27th, however, Jones was sought by New Mexico police in connection with a hit-and-run incident which left a pregnant woman severely injured. According to eyewitnesses, Jones had initially left the scene before grabbing a handful of cash and fleeing again, leaving behind several $100s and a marijuana pipe in the process.
Dude, I wonder if this is that fighter's car. Jon Jones? Well, he's fucked.
What was initially a misdemeanor was eventually upscaled to a felony for purposely leaving the scene of an accident. Jones was sentenced to 18 months of supervised probation and indefinitely suspended by the UFC, stripping him of his light heavyweight title in the process. While Jones would eventually regain his belt on 2 separate occasions, the hit-and-run incident was seen as the turning point in his fan perception, one that Jones has never repaired despite continued success in the cage. And now, time for a few dishonorable mentions. In 2014, Jones was accused of making homophobic slurs to an Alexander Gustafsson fan. Jones would later claim his account had been hacked in the days before the event, admitting himself to rehab on the advice of the UFC, only to leave the clinic the following day. Being a 240-pound heavyweight, yet still having chicken legs. Hey guys, it's good to be back. This is the INC. Please like, share, subscribe, and ring the bell so you never miss a video or a Jon Jones scandal.